You're watching teleSUR English. I'm Katrina Goss. We continue with our live coverage of the high-level debate of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. We're now going to go live to the statements of the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Andrew Holness.
To introduce an address by the Head of Government.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, it is my great pleasure and distinct honour to introduce to you Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, who will deliver a pre-recorded statement. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Mr. Abdullah Shahid, I extend warm congratulations on your election to the presidency of this 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I also commend your predecessor, His Excellency Mr. Volkan Bozkır, for his work during the historic 75th anniversary, a particularly difficult year for the United Nations and its membership as we grappled with the insidious COVID-19 pandemic. Your Excellency, you can be confident of Jamaica's continued commitment to collaborate and seek viable solutions for persistent global challenges, most notably the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. We must take a fresh look at how we rebuild sustainably, attain the Sustainable Development Goals, and renew our focus on social justice and climate action. Mr. President, the theme for this year's debate, with its emphasis on building resilience, is welcomed as the world searches for ways to manage the COVID-19 pandemic with its dreadful impacts on all aspects of human existence. We must inspire hope to drive our emergence from the scourge of this pandemic better and stronger than we were before. Mr. President, at the core of building resilience is restoring the health and well-being of our people. The pandemic has exacerbated challenges in this area, especially for small island developing states like Jamaica, which already face limited resources in our health sector. Most regrettably, many lives have been lost, and we extend our condolences. There are increasing uncertainties as the pandemic continues and new variants emerge. While mitigation efforts to help to reduce transmission and mortality remain crucial, the long-term solution must be vaccines that are accessible to all. We know that vaccines only work if a critical threshold is attained. Sharing vaccines in a strategic manner serves the global common good, as no country will be safe until all are safe. Jamaica supports a globally coordinated approach to the scaling up of production and equitable distribution of vaccines with the United Nations at the core. We welcome the support received from bilateral and international partners and through the COVAX facility. COVAX was conceived as an expression of multilateralism, bringing widespread aspiration of hope in the collective approach. While COVAX has not met all expectations, nevertheless, we believe in the essential merits of the facility and call for urgent, increased international collaboration to avoid the widening gap in recovery across countries and regions. Mr. President, today we see some countries receiving a digital dividend, while others suffer the consequences of a digital divide. There is need to urgently address this digital divide in COVID-19 adaptation measures, responses, and recovery efforts. Accelerated digitalization, remote work and education, e-commerce, and the virtual delivery of essential services have allowed the digitally connected to thrive while exacerbating the inequalities faced by the digitally disconnected. This is particularly evident in our rural areas, along gender lines, and generally among the poorest and most vulnerable. Addressing these negative consequences of the digital divide will require greater engagement of the public and private sectors in building foundations for long-term development. Leaving no one behind today means leaving no one offline. That is why Jamaica has been working to ensure that the tools needed to adapt and thrive are provided to our citizens. Mr. President, the COVID-19 pandemic has also spurred innovation and new forms of collaboration across sectors. We are committed to the development of a sustainable framework to ensure the availability of human capital to meet the growing, changing needs of the economy. Jamaica is taking an inclusive approach to improve digital literacy through increased access to and use of ICT by 50% in public institutions, schools, and key public areas in the country over the next 4 years. We are engaging our private sector to improve the application of science, technology, and innovation in educational institutions towards national development. We believe that countries should be supported in their efforts to build robust and resilient digital infrastructure. Public investments of this sort can serve as a force multiplier in narrowing the gaps that result in inequitable development outcomes. Universal, secure, and affordable digital connectivity is needed to ensure inclusive and sustainable development. We, therefore, advocate for an increased digital alliance within the global community and support the UN Secretary General's high-level panel on the Digital Cooperation Roadmap. Mr. President, the multiple challenges associated with the COVID-19 pandemic have placed severe pressure on our fiscal accounts, threatening our hard-won macroeconomic stability. The pandemic has demonstrated how quickly our development gains can be eroded, and that much more needs to be done by the international community to secure a resilient future for the most vulnerable. We must retain hope in our ability to meet the targets for the SDGs, even with adjusted timelines. Mr. President, last year, along with the Prime Minister of Canada and the UN Secretary General and other heads of state and government and key international partners, I convened the Financing for Development in the Era of COVID-19 and Beyond initiative. The outcome was ambitious, yet practical, with policy options to support COVID-19 response and recovery for consideration by the international community. It now remains for us to take action. Mr. President, for Jamaica, we anticipate real GDP recovery within 4 years, given the relative strength of our economy and the stimulus packages implemented both locally and internationally. However, we will require adequate fiscal space and funding to achieve the SDGs and to be able to respond and recover from the health, social, and economic implications of the pandemic in light of high debt servicing requirements. The continued use of measures of development which do not take into account the full spectrum of vulnerabilities of small island developing states is a major impediment to our efforts to attain the SDGs. We who live in one of the most disaster-prone regions of the world are more vulnerable than our income data suggests. We reiterate today that consideration of our development level must be linked to our socio-economic and environmental vulnerability. This rationale underpins the basis for a multidimensional vulnerability index for small island developing states and for the ongoing work by the UN on this matter, as endorsed by the United Nations General Assembly last year. Mr. President, the Caribbean Development Bank has reported that small island developing states' debts have risen to unsustainable levels since the pandemic. The number of Caribbean countries with a debt-to-GDP ratio above 60% has increased from 9 to 13, with the average debt-to-GDP ratio increasing to 85%. Jamaica maintains its call for a revision of the graduation criteria, as the classification system utilized by international financial institutions is simply not appropriate. We concur with the UN Secretary General in his assessment that graduation must be a reward, not a punishment. As we strive to build forward stronger in this decade of action, we call for the commitment of the international community to a post-COVID reality that guarantees greater investment and financing to support development and economic growth in small island developing states. We also seek the reorientation of the international financial system to align financing with sustainable development to accelerate our push to achieve our SDG goals. Mr. President, climate change remains one of the defining global challenges of our era and of even greater concern for future generations. Our ability to achieve sustainable development will be compromised if we do not find real solutions to the ongoing climate emergency. The demand for climate adaptation is increasing, but so is the fear that it will be unmet. A more worrisome truth is the IPCC's finding that human influence on the Earth's climate has already led to unprecedented and irreversible changes. In their efforts to combat these changes, small island developing states have been unable to access climate finance at the pace and scale necessary. We have instead been forced to spend significant funds on loss and damage, with limited financial support from large emitters. Jamaica joins with all small island developing states in calling for the delivery of the $100 billion per annum committed in 2015 by the international donor community. COP26 must deliver significant progress on the priority issues of climate financing, loss and damage, adaptation and mitigation, as well as the development of effective climate change plans. Mr. President, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea recognizes the ocean as a common heritage of mankind. As the science and the research have shown, we must also see the oceans as playing a vital role as a climate mitigator. We support the development of a legally binding international instrument on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. We look forward to the successful conclusion of negotiations for an international treaty under the Convention in 2022. Mr. President, we reaffirm the importance of multilateral approaches to the issues of peace and development and the central role of the United Nations in their treatment. We support the resolution of disputes, whether in the Middle East, in the Caribbean, or elsewhere, through dialogue and negotiated settlements. We call for an end to the economic, commercial, and financial embargo imposed by the United States of America against Cuba. Mr. President, the illicit proliferation of small arms and light weapons remains a daily challenge to citizen security and a grave concern to Jamaica. The widespread availability of these arms and their ammunition is a key enabler of conflict and endemic crime and represents a significant danger to our internal security, fostering criminal activities which destabilize the social order. We will work with all our partners to enhance the capacity of member states to address issues related to arms control and disarmament by preventing the diversion of conventional arms to the illicit market. This matter remains a priority for Jamaica as we seek the assistance of our bilateral, regional, and international partners in addressing this issue. President, the celebration of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations recognized the pivotal role of the organization, to which we continue to assign new mandates and challenges. Let us, with equal fervor, resolve to equip the organization with the necessary tools and financial resources to enable it to effectively undertake its leadership role in safeguarding international peace and security and in ensuring the economic and social well-being of mankind. Our common vision must be one in which the UN can act and will act as a catalyst for hope, for change, for peace, and as an instrument of progress on behalf of all peoples of the world. I thank you.
We've been watching live the statements of the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Andrew Holness, as part of the high-level debate of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. The Jamaican Prime Minister stressed that the COVID-19 pandemic poses more challenges to small island developing states like Jamaica, which already faced many challenges beforehand. He called for vaccines to be shared, stressing that no country will be safe until access to COVID vaccines is guaranteed for all. In this sense, he praised the COVAX initiative. Prime Minister Holness also underlined the gaps in terms of digitalisation across the world and called to ensure technology is shared with the poorest nations to address the digital divide. He also noted that the pandemic has spurred innovation in many areas as different sectors mobilise to address the challenges. Prime Minister Holness also called for international support to provide the financial measures that can allow small island developing states to advance in the wake of the current crisis. We're now going to go live to the address of the Prime Minister of Belize, John Brisset.